Hello friends, welcome back to DIY guitar making. I'm here at the shop. This will be a late night Q&A edition. In fact, I just want to pull this into the frame right here and hold it up to the camera. This is a little inside joke for my wife actually, because she knows when I work late at the shop, I have a nasty little habit of going out to the local pizza shop and getting myself a Mike's Harder Mango lemonade. A mango Mike's Harder lemonade. Sorry, I said that backwards. And I don't know why. Me and my wife, we drink wine and IPAs. I like a nice glass of whiskey occasionally. But there's something about the, I don't know, lack of pretense. In other words, the trashiness of a Mike's Mango Harder lemonade. And so, I don't know. I can't justify it. I just like it. So that's what we'll be doing tonight. I'm gonna be answering your questions, and I have a nice little libation for me during the process. Okay? I have been back from the Woodstock show for a little while now. I haven't had time to make a video, right? So for all practical purposes of this video, yeah, I just got back from the Woodstock show. So let's talk about that a little bit, mostly just to say that it was a really awesome show. I got to meet a lot of you guys, came out, and that was like, that kind of blew my mind. That was really cool to chat with you guys and put a face to a name, especially for people who are in the members forum. And at the same time, I got to make all kinds of new friends with other builders and the like. And so it really just was, more than anything, an awesome networking event, right? And since I had that big lead up with all the videos to the parlor guitars, here's the one that you never got to see before the show, or at least you never got to see with the finish on, and you never got to hear it. So let's hear how it sounds. Oh yeah, there's a good E chord there. Yeah, so funny thing about taking these two guitars, I took two parlor guitars to the show, and the funny thing was because they were brand new, like I just finished building and putting a finish on those guitars, in the beginning I really liked this guitar, and I was less impressed with the tone on the other guitar, and literally through the course of that show, halfway through the show, that flipped completely on me. I just started to notice, like, oh wow, the Wangy guitar honestly sounds better than this guitar. And that's just to further reinforce the idea that these instruments, when you first build them and string them up, they really truly are settling into an orientation that they're going to exist in for many, many years. And in the very beginning, they're resisting that settling. And so they literally sound different. When they settle in, the tone really opens up and it truly does change. That's one of those things that is, there's a lot of things that are myth in guitar making. That's one of those things that's very, very true. So you'll experience it for yourselves. If you're not deep into guitar making yet, you're going to experience that. You're going to notice that these things really do open up in a pretty short amount of time. So, you know, when I first string up an instrument, and if I'm kind of underwhelmed when I first play it, it happens a lot, honestly. It doesn't bum me out because I know it's not ready yet. It really does take a couple weeks, or sometimes less, for it to kind of accept the tension that it's now going to exist under. Okay, so here's this guitar, number 87 by the way. Rosewood back and sides. A lovely little thing. I really enjoy making these parlors. They are fun. So that's the Woodstock show. I also had a class. So I taught a class, one of my workshops. Since I came back from the Woodstock show, I had two awesome students came by, Cliff and Kevin, and we built two really incredible guitars. And yeah, we just had an awesome time. So there's another class I got coming up in December. And then there's actually a third class I'll have at the end of December if it fills up. It's open right now. Honestly, I'm going to give it like another week, and if it doesn't fill, I'm just going to delete that class. I probably placed it a little too close to Christmas for anyone's comfort, so it wasn't meant to be, I don't think. But hey, if you're hearing this right now and you want to get in on a class this winter, you don't want to wait until the spring classes that I have in the spring, then there you go. I don't know the exact dates off the top of my head, but I'll put them on the screen when I edit this video. Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and get into your questions. Okay, so we'll go ahead and, as always, start out in the members forum. For you guys who don't know, the members forum is something that's attached to the online guitar building school at ericschaeferguitars.com. So if you sign up for a course, you also become a member of the members forum. Okay, so we're going to start there, and you know what? I have been failing to read the question of the week whenever I do a Q&A. So there's a couple questions of the week that I'm going to read here, just because, you know, I come up with these questions and you guys in the members forum give me great feedback, and then I forget to include them in my videos. And I don't know, I feel like these questions are really good questions for dialogue. That's why I come up with them. So I don't want to just let them fall further down in the queue and get ignored. All right, so let's see. Here's one from a couple weeks ago. Do you build one guitar at a time, two at a time, or more? Essentially, what is your workflow process as far as quantity goes with your instruments? And Patrick writes, so far I just do one at a time. However, I'm planning and buying wood for the next one at the same time. LC Guitars writes, for acoustics, I do one box at a time. I do have a few sitting around waiting for necks and things. Electric guitars, I do at least two at a time. It just saves so much time between setups. Yeah, that's good to hear that you do two at a time with the electrics. So personally, I do both. I mean, I do one at a time quite often, but I also will do two at a time sometimes. I've tried three at a time before, and for me, things start to fall apart, and also I just become less interested in what I'm producing. It feels more like a factory process when I go beyond just two at a time. Two seems to be the sweet spot. For me, at least. We got some more here. Doc Joe writes, I have done two at a time, mostly electrics and or ukuleles. I end up making two and then do the finishing process with two instruments at a time. If I were to do multiple guitars, oh, sorry, I read that funny. And then do the finishing process with two instruments at a time. If I were to, I don't understand that actually. Okay, well he's saying he does two instruments at a time. However, I mostly do one at a time. Okay, so sometimes two, mostly one. You know, that seems to be the average here, especially from talking to other builders as well in the flesh. It seems like two is very common. Doing more than two, a lot less common unless you start to really build out a Henry Ford-like flow within your workshop, basically dedicating stations to certain tasks. To a small extent, I've done something like that in my workshop, but mostly my workshop is set up for versatility so that I can work on at my main workbench whatever I want to work on. When you station out your workshop too much, you lose the ability to customize things and follow that creative flow, which, you know, it's a trade-off. You gain great efficiency, of course. But anyway, let's see what else we got here. Another question of the week, this is actually the more recent one, is how much inlay or ornamentation is too much on a guitar? Okay, this was an intentionally polarizing comment. I wanted to see if I could push some buttons with this one. And let's see if I accomplish that. So Patrick writes, I think it's easy to do too much, but it depends on how much figure is in the wood. I think you can get away with more bling on plain wood. Most of the time, the wood is all the bling that you need. I agree with that, Patrick. That's a pretty good sentiment, actually. Yeah, the figure of the wood really does speak for itself. If you have just very stunning, very figured wood, the inlays that you put on it actually distract from it. I like that. Very good. LC Guitars writes, as beautiful as this is, I think it is a bit too much for my taste. But this guitar was sold, so someone thought it was perfect. I don't really like inlay / marquetry on the soundboard. And he's got some pictures here. These are from the show. So I talked to and hung out with LC Guitars. Robert Livingston is his name. We hung out at the show, and I know exactly what he's talking about here. This is a Michihiro Matsuda guitar, a really stunning, beautiful guitar. I like this. I like this a lot. Now, it's a lot. There's a lot going on there, but honestly, it's making a statement, and I think it's hard to put into words what this statement is, but it's trying to make a statement with the art that's on it, and I actually don't think it's too much. I think it was a lot to execute. You know, there's a lot of very fine, precise inlay work on this guitar, but I think it's tasteful. I think it's made the statement that it wanted to make, that he wanted to make, and then he got out of there. He stopped right where he should. I mean, he's a real master, Michihiro Matsuda, so it's really hard to find fault, for me at least, in a guitar like this. But he's one of my favorites, honestly. Gorgeous, gorgeous guitar. I'm not even sure how to describe it. I know I also put this out in podcast form, so I'm sorry to the listeners. I can't describe this guitar. It looks like a bunch of gears inlaid into the guitar, cogs and wheels and machinery, almost like watchmaker clockwork type machinery. That's the only way I can think of to describe this. You gotta watch the video to see this one. But then he writes, LC Guitars writes, this on the other hand was perfect, absolutely loved it, and he has a, I believe that's Kathy Wingert guitar there with a lovely little sea turtle, or not little actually, it's pretty large, a large inlay of a sea turtle on the headstock. It's simple, it makes its point, and it doesn't over embellish. So I do like that as well. Yeah, and then Patrick posted a picture of, I believe that's the 100th anniversary Martin guitar there, which just looks absurd. It just, there's pearl everywhere. I mean, it's not just around the sound hole, but it literally goes over and covers the sound hole. It's kind of an absurdity, but I think that was the point. It's the anniversary guitar. I just think, you know, I think there's a place for absurdity like that, and that's what they did. But anyway, an intentionally polarizing question, just to see what people would say. I know people have strong opinions about stuff like that. The way I always think about it, and I'm guilty of breaking this rule a lot, actually, but the way I think about inlay is you're trying to make a statement, and it could be a very, very subtle statement, but what you're trying to do is make a statement, and in the fewest, it's like being a good author, in the least amount of words possible, right? Same kind of thing. You're trying to make a statement with the least amount of bling, as Patrick put it, as possible. And so if you can do it in one or two small thumbnail-sized inlays around the guitar, then in a sense that makes you a more accomplished inlay artist than someone who takes up half of the real estate of the guitar to make that same statement. That's the way I like to think about it. I'm not saying it's the way to think about it, but that's me. Let's go ahead and jump to your actual questions now, and not just the question of the week. And we don't have much. It was really quiet this past week in the members forum. Not sure why, but there's really not much. Patrick sent a nice picture of the guitar he's working on. He did a little spray finishing with a spray-on shellac on the inside of the guitar. I was asking him what he used here. Let me check this out. So he writes, I've never finished the inside before. I think I like it. It's just shellac in a spray can. It doesn't take but just a... Okay, I'm going to rephrase that. It takes just a few minutes. And then I asked him what it was. He said Zinsser shellac, and that he got it at Lowe's. Okay. Because I liked it. I think it looks like it's sprayed on really evenly, and I'm very skeptical of using a spray product for finish on the inside of the guitar. Just too many inside corners, and so I'd imagine it would be really difficult to get a sort of even spray without getting a lot of accumulation on those inside corners. I would prefer to rub on the inside of the guitar, do a rub-on finish. But if it works, it works. So that's why I wanted to ask him which product he was using. Okay, Brian Bullard, who I saw at the Woodstock show, writes, I want to thank Eric when we met up at the Luthier show on his suggestion as to why I was having so much trouble getting the edges on my back plate straight for glue up. He suggested that the straight edge I was using was probably not straight. I purchased a StewMac 24-inch fret/fingerboard leveler, sanded up with the grits, and voila! Perfect match and no light shining through the light box. I glued it up and it was perfect. It's my first glue up of a back, but it's a start. Also, I finished my side bender. All that's left to do is figure out a thickness sander and make my go-bar deck. Okay, that's great, and I'm glad you posted this, Brian, actually, because that's a good point to make and a good tip, and actually the kind of tip that is a good thing to understand, not just in the narrow case of jointing tops and backs, but really throughout guitar making. I often notice that beginner builders especially, not that Brian is a beginner builder even, but beginner builders especially will have a tendency to assume that the tools they're working with, without checking them, have a tendency to assume that the tools they're working with are flat. And I think one thing you learn when you get further down the road is to always check that assumption frequently, actually. So even the little sanding blocks that I use for various things, they go out of flat from time to time, and I have to true them up. Almost everything in here has to be trued up at some point. So, you know, when you're having issues, start there. Start with the flatness of the tools or the assumed flatness. Check it and fix it if it's not right. Okay? It makes sense to blame the operator most of the time. You know, usually it's user error. It's you. It's not the tool. But sometimes it's the tool. And if it is the tool, you'd rather find that out right away rather than going through all the agony of watching more YouTube videos and trying to correct your technique. It's real easy to check if you just keep a reliable straight edge. Now even that can go out of flat too, right? But you know, if it's really thick and it was professionally milled, it should be a reliable straight edge. And that is something you can always keep sort of in the center of your shop. I keep mine right there, so it's easy to grab, and I can just check leveling beams that I have. I can check the surfaces of tables on my jointer, on my table saw, whatever, on my router table, all that stuff. Just always keep that in mind. Things start out flat and they go out of flat. Keep checking. It's a part of the game here. And I think that's all we have in the members forum, unfortunately. So more questions, please. Members, come on. Do your job. All right, let's go check out YouTube. Okay, so we're over here on YouTube now, checking out your comments, and USA for the win is commenting on a video that I did about jointing your plates, and he writes, it's been 3 days and I can't even get them to joint. Well, I wanted to include this one specifically, actually, because this is what I addressed with Brian Bullard's comment, where he was having this same issue, and it turned out to be that the tool he was using, the leveling beam, or in his case he was using a carpenter's level, like one you would get from Lowe's or Home Depot, which are notoriously out of flat. And he checked that tool and realized that that was the problem and went on from there. So check your tools, right? And check your planes too. I mean, so in the process that I describe here, you're more or less using the plane to rough in, to get your joint really close, and then fine tuning it with a flat beam, like the fret leveling or fingerboard leveling beams that StewMac sells, that type of beam. You don't have to get them from StewMac. You can get them something like that from a, you know, a metal fabricating shop. And just make sure it's flat, right? Because that's the final tool that touches it. Okay, Goran Yao writes, I cannot find skew cut maple. Can I use plastic or aluminum/copper plate instead? And he's talking about for bridge plates. Okay, so well, first of all, can you find maple? forget about the skew cut part of it, what the grain orientation is like. Even using flat sawn maple is probably better, well, definitely better than plastic. You don't want to use plastic. You could use plastic for your bridge plate, but trust me, you just don't want to use plastic for your bridge plate. I can't think of a worse place to put plastic on your guitar. There's a lot of bad places to put plastic on your guitar, but that's, I mean, that's no good. It's really going to affect the sound. And then aluminum or copper, I don't think, that actually goes in the opposite direction. So plastic is going to be a tone sink, but using a metallic material for your bridge plate, I think is going to really brighten up the tone and make it sound basically brash and metally, which is something you're always trying to pull out of, to remove from a steel string guitar, because the string material itself is too bright and brash and metally. Now, I only say this not from experience. I've never made a bridge plate out of those materials that he's talking about, and I don't know anyone who has either, so I don't think it's really, I don't know that it's a thing. If it is a thing, you guys can shout at me in the comments. But I haven't really heard about people using aluminum or copper for bridge plates, but I have seen people using, I forget what Stu Mac calls it, but it's like the bridge plate saver or something like that. It's this little brass plate that can be installed onto your existing bridge plate. And I think some people have done it, have installed that just to get a certain sound out of their guitar, but it was primarily designed to rescue bridge plates that have split, right? But from what I've heard about those products, that they do make the guitar sound brighter and basically just too bright, right? It's too brash, too metallic, generally considered, from what I hear, not a good thing. So that's my opinion on it, but speaking a little bit out of my zone here, because I don't know, it's just not something I've experienced or really even talked that much about in the past. So let's see what else we got. But getting back to my initial point, if you can't find skew cut maple, don't worry about that grain orientation aspect of it. Even flat sawn maple, I would take flat sawn over quarter sawn in the case of a bridge plate, because you don't want to get splits running across your bridge pin holes. So if you get a bridge plate that's totally flat sawn, that will still hold up and not split across the holes. So start there. No, I'm not going to read that. Awesome video, Eric. This is from Scara60. Awesome video, Eric. Just an FYI to the person looking for a saddle slotting jig, look up Bo Hannum Guitars on YouTube. He has a step-by-step jig build. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. That's very useful. So anyone who's, you know, the Stu Mac saddle slotting jig that everyone has, I have it too. You can build it yourself. It's not hard to do. I've never done it, but owning the jig, I can understand how sort of simple it would be to make that jig. And it's good to know that someone, Bo Hannum, who's a well-known guitar maker, has made a tutorial and put it out there for all you guys to consume. So look that up. I actually didn't know that Bo Hannum made videos, so I'm going to have to check that out. I know who he is, but I did not know that he was, you know, doing educational content on YouTube. BL Dallas writes, great stuff. I love parlor-sized guitars. Your 13 fret idea is intriguing. It's not my idea. But anyway, he writes, my current parlor is a 12 fret, which I really like, but that extra fret of exposed neck would open up some full octave chord scenarios while still giving a slightly larger body for tone. I look forward to catching up in this series of videos. Yeah, the 13 fret guitar, so this parlor guitar behind me and all my parlor guitars, well, I only have two now, but all of them that I'll build in the future as well, I think will be this 13 fret model, simply for the reasons, honestly, that he laid out right there. I feel like there's a sweet spot between the 12th fret and the 14th fret that is underutilized. I will say I don't know that, I've never seen a small bodied guitar like this with 13 frets to the body, but a 13 fret to the body guitar is not entirely unheard of. Even Martin made one at one point. How crazy is that? It's not like Martin to, you know, step outside the box and do something really crazy, but sometimes they do. So, you know, kudos to them for doing something crazy. They made a 13 fret to the body guitar. I believe it's called the SC13. Not many people really know about it. Gibson did one way back in the day. I forget what they called that. And I think Santa Cruz maybe has a 13 frets to the body guitar. They're very rare. It's very rare that you find a 13 fret to the body guitar, but it's not unheard of, and it wasn't my idea. So, AMR Tidy writes on the episodes I was doing about the Woodstock show leading up to it, he writes, so this Woodstock show was last weekend, right? So the funny thing is that, you know, I did this series of videos of me getting ready in sort of a whirlwind of work, trying to get ready for this guitar show in basically a week and a half, get these 2 guitars done and a number of other things. And, you know, on top of the work that I had to do to get those guitars ready, I also had to edit and put those videos out. And so the one thing that fell to the wayside, I got everything else done, but I did not get those videos out in time. So basically, I had the videos scheduled out to be released. Half of them were released before the show, but then the last 2 or 3 videos, I mean, it was just after the show date. There was nothing I could do about it, except release them all on the same day, which would just be a bad idea. I mean, far less of you guys would actually get to see all those videos if I just dumped them all on YouTube on the same day. So such is life, you know, when you're doing this sort of thing, and in addition to building instruments, you're also trying to make content and manage that side of things. It's difficult. It's a lot to do. So yeah, I figured most people wouldn't really mind the fact that the show was actually in the past, even though I was talking about it like it was coming up in the future. But this guy noticed. I knew somebody would. Okay, and so Walter Ryder writes, thank you, Eric. If I may ask, why can you not fret the fretboard before gluing it to the neck? As I am ham-handed and it scares me to think of whacking the frets over the body. Well, Walter, you can. You absolutely can. Most people do fret the fretboard before they glue it, even to the neck. So I'm kind of in the outlier here, in that I refuse to fret the fretboard until everything is glued in place. Essentially, the neck is attached to the body, and that's simply so that I can level the fretboard with my radius beam before I put those frets on there. So in that way, I don't have to level the frets at all. Sometimes I have to do just that tiny touch of leveling if I notice I'm getting some rocks with my fret rocker. But in general, the idea is I don't have to do fret leveling if I level the board itself in place. But hey, most people don't like to do it that way. I totally understand why. It's a lot of sanding. It's a lot of work, especially if... Actually, I take that back. It's not a whole lot of sanding if you have got your neck joint game down really solid. Okay? So if everything before you attach the neck to the body is done right and very accurately, which just takes time, it takes many iterations of building to get there. If that's all done right, then it's really not a whole lot of sanding to apply that radius in place with a radius beam. It's some sanding for sure, but it's not as unbearable as some people may have experienced with their first or their second guitar, where, say, they didn't get the neck angle all that great, and so they ended up having to sand out a lot more. So that's just something to keep in mind. As you get better with these things, that step will become more appealing to you, to just do it all over the body like that. But I will say, most people radius off the guitar and then install, in fact, most companies, even most major companies, then install the fretboard with the frets installed after the fact. Keith Short writes, regarding bridge slots, I cut it before mounting with a Dremel base jig. My jig is a copy of Bo Hannum's. Oh, there we go. Someone mentioned it again. When I glue the slotted body on the bridge, I have a mounting jig with a dummy nut and a saddle fixed to a 1/2-inch dowel rod. This does a great job of setting the scale length. I have individual scale length jigs for my tenor and concert ukuleles. That's a great idea. Yeah, things related to your scale length are really easy to jig out. Just make like dedicated rulers and things like that. That's a great idea, Keith. Okay, and you know what? I think that's good. I'm going to cut it off there. Thanks for posting your questions. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for just being awesome people. And hey, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.